Welcome to today's episode of Unthinkable, a podcast about the aftermath of incidents causing catastrophic injury or death, the experts who are called to serve when these accidents occur, and lessons that we can all learn and implement in our own personal lives. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, kylebachus.com. Now here's the host of the Unthinkable podcast, Kyle Bachus.
Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Kyle Bachus, and I'm a personal injury lawyer. I have been working in the field of personal injury law for almost 30 years. And after years of working with my own clients and helping them navigate through the difficulties in the wake of catastrophic injury, deaths, or being victims of crime, unfortunately, I came to face my own tragedy in my own family when, after doing this for more than 25 years, my own mother was killed by a commercial truck while walking in a walkway in 2020. And that experience, going through this, not only as a professional helping families, but then experiencing this from the side of a victim, really led me to, I think, be in a very unique position to provide information for families. And so that is why this podcast was started, specifically about the aftermath of incidents involving catastrophic injury or death. And what we do is we talk with the experts and the people who are called to serve once an accident or event happens, and to really not only learn more about why they do what they do and what they do, but also to help us learn the things that we can implement in our own lives that might help us prepare if we have people who we know, or just to have basic life hack information. And today I am so thrilled to have as a guest on this podcast, Lori Brown. And Lori Brown is a victims advocate with the Colorado State Patrol. And I have known Lori for many years now, and I'm just enthralled by what she does and the way she helps people. And so welcome, Lori. Thank you for being here today. Really, really appreciate it. I know you're busy.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on your show, and you see a lot of what we do, and just helping people navigate through the unthinkable, right?
Yeah. So, Lori, can you start just by telling our listeners what is a victim's advocate? Like, what is that? I think people may have heard of I can put those two words together and advocating for victims, but what is a victim's advocate, and especially your role at the Colorado State Patrol?
Yeah. So with Colorado State Patrol, we have 6 victim advocates throughout the state. And we are called whenever there's a serious or fatal car crash or child abuse case. And we are there to help the families from that onset through charges. And we just walk them through, we help them get items from their vehicle. We let them know the process. We let them know where the offender is. There's just so many different things we can help with. We get them hotel rooms if needed. We take them to the airport, pick them up from the airport. We're just really there as a resource so they don't feel so lost. Those moments when you lose someone or someone is seriously injured, your whole world is just turned upside down. And so we're kind of there just to be that calm and explain what's going on, what the next steps are, and just, try our best to give them a little bit of power in that situation to make some decisions. And, we're there with them throughout. I have a case currently that I'm still going to court with the family after almost 4 years. So,
oh my goodness.
Yes.
Let me say this. So, I think we've all heard like the idea of, if something really bad happens to a family member, that somebody might come knock on your door and inform you of the worst possible news, right? And I know that after my mom was killed, and she was down in Florida at the time, and my sister lived down there, that's what happened, is somebody came and knocked on the door. Nobody wants to be on the receiving side of that knock. But I think most people don't want anything to do with the idea of being on the front side of that knock either. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so first of all, you are one of the people who might come inform a family about a loss like that. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Why in the world would you want to do that for a living? Like, I mean, what is, I'm just very interested
You know,
because it's a really admirable but tough thing to think about.
yeah, and I mean, that's probably the hardest thing we have to do. I mean, we are changing someone's lives when we knock on that door. And, people always ask, how do you do that? How do you tell people that? But I guess I try to look at it. We do our best to try to do those in person. So we try to be with that person so they're not alone when they hear it. They have a few facts of what happened, what time it happened, where it happened, was there another vehicle involved? Just those little pieces of information are so helpful versus, sometimes people just get a phone call from the coroner saying, hey, your loved one died, and they don't have any details. And they just tell them they died, and they don't know, they might have told them it's a crash, but they don't have any other information. So with us, while it is the hardest thing we have to do, we're at least there with them when we can be. We can give them those few details, which are very helpful, it seems. A lot of people want to know what time it happened, where did it happen, was anyone else hurt or injured? So, I guess that's the one side of it that, it's just, we're giving them information. And they're, like I said, just not getting a phone call saying, so their loved one died and they don't know how, they don't know what time, they don't know where, and they have no idea what the next step is. They'll know our agency is investigating, and then they'll also know that we're there with them throughout the entire process. So they have someone with them.
So obviously, this is something that a part of the job that you choose to do. And how long have you, Lori, been doing this?
So I have, in October, it'll be 8 years with State Patrol. And then prior to this, I volunteered about it was almost 3 years with Denver Police Department. So in total, almost, I guess, 11 years.
So when you see, obviously you're making this choice and you work with other victims advocates, is there some like common trait in a person that draws them to this line of work? Or what was it about this line of work generally that you said, yeah, you know what, I think I would like to surround myself with families who are recently subject of a tragedy? How did you get into this?
So, I actually, when I was in college, I did an internship in Kansas City with the district attorney's office as a victim advocate, or in the victim advocate unit. And I just fell in love with it. It was primarily at that point working with domestic violence victims, but helping them through the process, helping them with all the paperwork they had to fill out. That was just so rewarding. So I always enjoyed doing that, helping people in crisis. I ended up actually working in politics for about 12 years at the state capitol. So, that was great and a great experience. And, we get to see a lot of the legislation that passed that affects all of these cases, right? And then once I was kind of ready to be done with that, I started volunteering with Denver Police Department just to see if that initial one I did was with the district attorney's office. And so I wanted to see what the other side was like with the law enforcement side. And I really, I guess I enjoyed the chaos of it. Just being that calm in the storm. That's something I liked. And empathy, I think people who do this have to have great empathy for others and, just kind of put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, what are they going to need next? And try to, just help them through that process.
So do you have like regular shifts where you are on a certain number of hours a day? And then outside of that, is there also like on call? Because I would imagine there's, tragedy, as we know, unfortunately can strike at any time, 24 hours a day.
Yes.
And so how is your schedule maintained?
So our schedule, since there are only 6 of us throughout the state, we're kind of split up into teams of 3, and all of us are on call 24/7, 7 days a week, or I'm sorry, 5 days a week, and then every third weekend we are off. So when my 2 partners are off, I'm covering their area. So then it's from the top to Wyoming, through Jefferson County, down to Douglas County, all the way to Kansas border. So it's a pretty big chunk. There's 2 of us on call on the weekends, and then we have a backup just in case we get overwhelmed with cases. But we're on 24/7. We're very used to getting called at, seems like things always happen at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning.
And so tell me how that goes, right? So you are, you say you're always on call.
Yep.
Are you on call right now?
I am. Yeah, I sure am.
If something were to come through, how do you, in your job, how do you first learn that there is an event that has happened that needs your input?
So usually we get a call from our dispatch center. They're usually the first ones that call us. Every so often a sergeant on scene will call us directly, but usually, once the troopers get onto the scene and realize it's a fatality or drugs or alcohol involved or something very serious, they'll instruct dispatch to give us a call. And so that's how we're notified.
And so they just call your cell phone?
Mm-hmm. Yep. We all have state issued cell phones. So they call our cell phone, let us know what's going on. And then we'll reach out to whoever's on scene and see if we're needed on scene, if we're needed at the hospital, if we're needed to go do a notification. So there's so many different ways we can go.
So when you get notified and you check, let's say you check in to see whether you're needed on scene, how often are you going to the scene or location where this has happened?
It's pretty often. Sometimes, if family shows up on scene, that happens quite often. People get crash alerts on their phones, or their phones or their watches go off. And so sometimes family finds out about that almost before we do, because they'll get that alert sometimes before dispatch even has the call.
So I know they have that like on Life 360 and on, I think on some iPhones as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I love and hate it. I would personally want to know if someone one of my loved ones was involved in a crash right away. But it's really hard because when we do notifications, we have to wait for the coroner to properly identify that person. So for example, I had a case where a dad was calling in. We knew it was his son. Because he had his pinpoint location, everything matched up, but we couldn't tell him for sure until the coroner gave us that okay. So that took a while. That took a couple hours, and so that's the hard part. Is families hear about that crash or are notified via their phone, but then we can't confirm it for a while, and so that's the reason I don't love those programs, is because I think it's just so hard for the families to wait, because there's always that off chance that maybe it's not, maybe their phone got stolen. You never know if their phone got stolen. So we just have to make sure that's something we cannot mess up on. And so that's the one side that is really hard with those crash alerts.
Yeah. And after my mom was killed, I know that, it took like 5 hours before we were notified. And I think that, that it's hard as a family member to think that this happened and you're not told for multiple hours. But to your point, I mean, it makes some sense. You have to be sure of who you're notifying, because the last thing you want to do is notify the wrong family, right? Something happened and it wasn't, like you said, maybe somebody's phone got stolen and it's not their loved one.
Yeah, absolutely. Or people have, we had one where brothers had switched IDs, because the one younger one took his older brother's one. So, he could go to the club. And so, cases like that, you just have to, we just have to be sure who it is. And that time, that time, several hours, 5 hours, that just, that's so hard, I know, for families. But we just have something we can't mess up.
So when you are notified on your cell phone and you call and okay, I need to go to the location, how does that feel to you? I mean, because you know that you are going to drive up, I mean, all of us have been on the highway. We pass by a crash, and maybe you pass by one. You're like, God, I hope everybody was okay. Looks really bad. But you're going, Lori, to a location where um, there's been just a tragedy that's occurred, and you're going to roll up there, and it might be 2 o'clock in the morning. It might be 10 o'clock in the morning. How do you feel like when you're going through that process?
Usually my first thing, I say a quick prayer to get me, to make sure I'm doing everything right. And then I just try to take a moment, take a couple breaths. Cause you get that rush, that adrenaline rush. You still do after, I think everyone probably does, no matter how long you've done this. Cause you're going into the unexpected. Yeah. You might have a little bit of information from dispatch, but you don't have the full story. And so you just have to go in there with as much information as you can. And then, you just have to go in not knowing what's going to happen. There could be family that has shown up since. It could be, someone related to someone with state patrol. It could be, there's so many different scenarios. So you're really going into the unexpected. So you really just have to be flexible enough to handle anything, you just never know.
When it's not the scene, if it's to the hospital, is that also because maybe somebody who has been badly injured is taken to a hospital and they ultimately don't make it, and you're going there specifically to interface with the family? Is that what you're?
Usually we try to go with, be with the family. In that case, if someone passes at the hospital, then the hospital will be the one to notify them usually. So we'll just be there with the family. If they need a ride home, something like that, we'll offer that as well. Or if someone's seriously injured and family's there, we can at least, again, give them that little bit of information that we have. Here's what happened, where it happened, what time it happened. That seems to make a really huge difference with people, because at least they have a little bit more knowledge of what occurred.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that when my family was informed, it's especially, and I've said this previously, like, I'm a guy who likes to fix stuff, right? And so you give me a problem and I want to try to fix it. Well, when you're coming and knocking on the door, or you're talking with a family at the hospital, it's probably about something that is a forever consequence and can't be fixed. And it's strange how in your mind, that kind of fixer, you want the details, like you kind of crave, like, wanting to understand how this could have happened and when it happened and why it happened. I'm not even sure why that becomes so important, but it does. It becomes very important to victims to get as much detail as possible.
Yeah. And I find a lot of times when you tell them the first time, they don't, and you can't blame them. They don't remember all of it. So we always tell people, we're giving you a lot right now, but always ask us again. If you can't remember the time, or if you can't remember what we told you, because, it's so overwhelming when you get that news, as you know, and it's hard when you get all this information to retain it. It's hard to, you have so many other things going on. So we always tell people, always ask us again, or we can tell you again exactly all the details as many times as needed.
Now, I want to talk about all of the other things that you continue to do after the initial notification. But before we move on, I just, from the well-being of a victim's advocate, right? You get exposed to this, even from the outside. I would, and as well as you might be able to, like, I don't know, box it out or frame it out, that it's got to take some sort of emotional toll on you or on other victims advocates. How do you guys reset, or what are there things that you guys do to try to make sure that mentally you guys are okay?
Yeah. So our boss, Dolores Peppel, she's amazing. And, if we have a bad case, or horrifically, an exceptionally bad one, she'll take us off call. If we need a break, we can take it. My team is amazing, and we all check in with each other quite often. And so being able to talk to someone else about those cases and knowing you're not going to traumatize them with some of those details that are, sometimes pretty horrific, that's very helpful too. Personally, for me, getting out in nature, if I can just go take a walk or a hike somewhere, that is something that kind of resets everything with me when I've had a bad case. But, with all of us, there's always cases that are going to sit with you for the rest of your life. You're just never, you'll never forget them. You won't forget the families. So there's always ones that will sit with you. And I always say that's okay. But I think it's important you have to have a lot of self-awareness of when, okay, I need to take a day off or a couple of days off, because this was just a really tough week or a tough case. And like I said, our supervisor, she is so good at, making sure we have that, because that's, I think, how we can continue to do this for such a long time is we have a good support from our supervisor, from our major, from my team. We all support each other and we can talk about it. And that's really important.
Well, bless you for doing what you're doing. Is there ever a situation where a particular victim's advocate says, I just can't deal with the children, maybe, or like a child case or other, I don't know what, I just use that as an example, but a certain type of case where they just can't do any more of those. Does that ever happen?
I don't know that that's happened for sure. Not that I can think of, I guess, but, I know I guess my standard for things is if I can't give these people my best, then another advocate needs to take over. I had a Thanksgiving a few years ago, and I think, my goodness, I think I had 9 fatals in about 5 days. And I was doing a notification for one and I got another fatal, and I'm like, nope, I can't do that because that person deserves my best. And right now I can't give it to them because I had so many other families I was working with. So that's how I gauge it when I need to take a step back, is if I can't give them my best because I have so many other cases or, so many other calls, then another advocate needs to step in. So I think we're all pretty good at doing that and recognizing that in ourselves.
Well, and I think that, the one thing that you're exposed to that I'm exposed to in my profession is that I think that for whatever reason, maybe it's subconscious, most people feel pretty safe driving a car. They have this, like, I guess, to me, I know the most dangerous thing you do is get into a 4,000-pound box and drive 50 miles an hour, 10 feet away from somebody else who's driving in another 4,000 to 10,000-pound box. And that's not if there's a commercial vehicle next to you that might be 80,000 pounds. But I personally, I'm not a huge fan of spending a lot of time on the road because of what I see. Do you get that same sort of?
Absolutely. I think we are all very much like that, especially, 2-lane road, the 2-lane roads I am absolutely like that because you just never know, after all we see.
We literally put our lives in the hands of strangers every day, driving on the road, and we're just hoping, that everybody pays attention, is going to do the right thing.
Yeah, and it's scary. And lately, I don't know, this summer it seems like there's so many more people on the road, more than normal. Yeah, everywhere I've gone, it's just so busy and crowded on the road. So I feel that more than ever right now.
Yeah. And so after you make the first initial contact and you're providing some information about what happened and you're providing support, can you just tell us, how you, for instance, you said you're still working with a family 4 years later. And can you just talk about how your role continues with the families?
So we'll update them throughout our investigation, and some, our investigations, they can take a while because we're waiting for toxicology. And I know we're kind of back, we send everything to CBI, and I know they get 6 to 8 weeks out. And so our charges usually aren't filed immediately. So there's kind of a wait and a time frame with that. And so, we'll notify the families of updates, let them know where the case is. We'll notify them once charges are filed, and give them their rights. So Victim Rights Act, we give them their information. And then we do kind of a gentle handoff to the DA's office. If it is a fatal crash, we will help the families find a good funeral home. We will help them apply for victim compensation, which can help with that, help with counseling, potentially medical bills as well. There's just so many different things, we can assist with. COVA, the Colorado Organization for Victim Assistance, sometimes they'll step in and help with rent assistance for a month for families. So, there's just so many different aspects, but primarily, updating them, making sure, if it is a fatality, their loved one's taken care of. Is it a good funeral home? They're getting compensation for some of those costs because it's
one of the things I'm so glad that you brought up, Lori, is this time frame from when the tragedy first happens to when charges may even be brought, because I think that we live in such a everything is now world, and we watch TV shows and you see 1 second there's an event and then there's charges immediately thereafter. But when there are fatalities, I mean, first of all, usually both vehicles are taken and they're impounded by the police during an active investigation. And then, like you said, there's toxicology, so that when they're making charges, are they charging for something that's a felony or a misdemeanor? And this time frame goes by, and most families don't know that. They don't know that it's going to be something that even seems clear cut, right? Why is it taking months? But that's more normal than not, right?
Yeah, it is. And especially with traffic, if someone is, murdered with a gun or a knife and there's a witness, that's a quick arrest, Yeah. Whereas if someone's murdered or killed with a vehicle, that's just a long process to prove. Yeah. Were they intoxicated? Were they reckless? There's so many different things, and waiting for that toxicology, waiting for those inspections of the vehicles, that all just takes time because we want to get it right.
Yeah. And I think, even in my own personal case, it was about 3 months from the timing of when my mom was killed, and what was very clear cut especially from our family's perspective, very clear cut, but 3 months before there were charges. And my sister and brother, we leaned on the victim's advocate to help us understand what the process was going to be, and to understand that it's not that the police aren't working on this, but there are some aspects of it that take time. And especially we see also with this EDR download, where they're taking the imaging of the information, that the black boxes in the vehicles, and getting access to all of that. So there's quite a bit involved.
Yeah, and waiting for phone warrants, things like that. I mean, those can take, my goodness, months sometimes. So, I mean, there's so many different pieces of it, and those pieces all take time. And, and I know it's hard for families to wait, but we try to prepare them for that. But, it's hard when you lose a loved one like that. I know that's hard. That's a hard wait. But, again, like I say, we always want to get it right and don't want to rush it.
And the phone warrant that you mentioned, that's is somebody texting and driving? That's the way you got to go and actually issue a warrant to subpoena records from the phone company, from the person who was at fault, to see what was happening with their phone at the time of the crash.
Correct. Yeah. So, and those can take, I think they get so many requests for those, the phone companies, that it just takes so long to get those back to us.
And so you talked also about victims' compensation. Can you talk just a little bit about what that is and how that works for families, so that people know?
Yeah, so that's each judicial district has their own victim compensation board, and most of them meet once a month, and they will people can fill out an application for assistance, again, for funeral costs, for counseling, for medical costs, anything like that. And so they'll turn that in. The board will look at it and decide whether or not to offer any assistance. And most districts, it's up to $30,000. And I believe, again, most of them, I think it's around $10,000 that they'll assist with funeral costs. And that's per person. That's not, so if there's 2 fatalities, there'd be 2 applications. So it's not per case, it's per victim.
And this is for crime victims, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of a car crash as a crime, but that's exactly what it is. And those families who have suffered the consequences, who have survived, those are crime victims, and they are eligible for these benefits that you just described because they're victims of crime.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They're victims of crime, and they have every right to receive those benefits as anyone else.
Yeah, and so you assist in that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll help them either fill it out or at least guide them to the application, and make sure they get those turned in, because I don't, until you have to pay for a funeral, I don't know how people don't realize how much one is, and it's extremely costly. And especially if you think about, if you have multiple family members killed in a crash, that could be $20,000-$30,000.
Well, and really, then you probably are taking some time off of work, right? To leave. And so you're in a position where you have this big expense that yesterday you weren't even thinking about. It's now come up, and you probably are going to be taking some time off of work. And so it's a really bad financial time to have to come up with it. And you can't wait. You have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, that, and then, medical costs, my goodness. If sometimes when we get a crash out east, someone might be flown over to University Hospital. I think that's like, maybe $30,000 or $40,000 helicopter flight right there. Not to mention all of the other costs, associated with their care. So I had a victim, he's a bicyclist, and his medical bills were well over $1 million.
Wow.
In the end, so there are just so many things, and people are already, it's hard enough when you're trying to recover from a death or injuries, and then to have that stress of financial, victim compensation is something that can, hopefully ease that a little bit for a lot of those victims.
Now, one of the other things that I think people have to confront after a loss is when the charges are actually brought. I think as a victim of a crime, even if it's a motor vehicle crime, you think, well, gosh, so this person who killed my relative, they're going to go to jail for a long time, right? And in a lot of cases, actually, unless there's some sort of intentional or reckless conduct or drunk driving, it's charged as a misdemeanor, maybe careless driving resulted in death. So you wait like 3 months, and then you get the news that, oh, actually, it's just being charged as a misdemeanor, even though your relative is as dead as they would be if somebody had pulled out a gun and shot them. Yeah. Do you have to help deal with dealing with that scenario with the families?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's a hard charge, because I've had some cases where it feels like we shouldn't charge it. If you have an older couple or someone with their child and there's no recklessness, there's no speed, it's just they hit a patch of ice, something like that. And their loved one is killed. Those are hard, because it's like, oh, you don't want to see them go through that as well. But then in other cases, someone runs a stop sign and kills 2 people. It just doesn't seem like enough, So I always tell people that's a really difficult charge, because sometimes people get upset when we charge that because they don't want it charged. And then they get upset because we charge that, and, it's not enough. And so I wish there was another charge for sometimes, because that's a really difficult one, the careless driving causing death. Because misdemeanor, and it's usually a fine, maybe some community service, and you lost your mom. It just doesn't, it doesn't seem right.
It can be really difficult. And there you are, kind of explaining in some instances that kind of second bad news, right? Which is, I had to come tell you that your relative has been killed, and now I have to tell you that even though after 3 months there's a decision to charge, that the outcome of the charges in your mind may not feel like
Mhm.
the punishment fits the crime.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's a very common, like I said, that's careless death charge is a very difficult one because it just doesn't seem like enough sometimes, for
And so
what families are going through.
after charges are brought, and you said that there's maybe once the prosecutor's office is involved, is that kind of the end of the road in some respects for your work?
Yeah, usually. So we work really closely with a lot of the advocates in the court system. And so we'll make sure they get in contact with each other. And we let them know, hey, I'm your law enforcement advocate. You'll have a court advocate who will notify you of hearings. In some cases, we will be there as just a support for the families in court cases. So that's the one that's going on 4 years. That's still going through court. And, those are a little bit more rare, but if sometimes people just need that extra support, and sometimes they'll connect with us, and, we're happy to be there and sit with them and, just be that person there for them and help them through it.
Well, I know from my own practice that there's a lot of families that you develop relationships with as a victim's advocate, that you become somebody who understands their grief and understands what they've been through, and they feel comfortable expressing that grief to you, and you develop a relationship. And I think it's terrific. That must be one of the more gratifying parts about what.
Yeah, it is. I always say I meet the nicest people, and I hate it because usually I'm telling them terrible news, but some of the families are so wonderful, and or a lot of the families are just so wonderful. And I always say I meet the nicest people in the most unfortunate circumstances, but you definitely get a connection with a lot of them.
So from all that you spent the last 8 years of your life doing, beyond that, really, it sounds like more than like 10 years, are there some things that you think you can tell our audience here, the people who listen with us, things to think about, that your perspective on things to think about in the event of a traumatic event?
Yeah, I always think, or now I'm always thinking, that saying, always be prepared for the worst, but hope for the best. And so, the families that already have a will in place, or, someone, if they have young kids, who's going to take the kids, I guess I think of that a lot more, just because that makes things a little bit easier on the families. If that's already all set and in place, you hope that never comes to, that you need that. But, I think just being prepared, just trying to be prepared for the worst, but
it's great advice.
For the best.
It's really, really great advice. One of the things that we went through is, thank goodness. I mean, my mom had went out on a walk, and she left up her like Shutterfly account. She was working on the photo album on there, and she had her Facebook open. And so, but since I've learned that if there's a lot of these companies, they'll never share a password with you. If somebody doesn't know how to access your stuff, it's never going to get accessed.
Yeah. No, we have that problem. Sometimes one spouse is the one that pays all the bills and knows all the bank account information, and the other spouse, they have no idea how to get into it, and in those cases, sometimes you have to wait for the coroner's report or the death certificate to even be able to get into the bank account. So
because you have to be appointed as a personal representative, you have some sort of legal authority, but in that meantime, you may have no access to any of the money or the ability to pay any of the bills. Yeah.
So I think just being prepared, hoping it never happens, but just in case, being prepared. And then also, I think it's important to ask questions when, if it does happen, ask questions, of your advocate, of the investigator, whoever it might be. They deserve the right to be informed.
Yeah. And what about
what's going on?
What do you think about advice that you might have based upon your so much experience in dealing with families who have had a tragedy happen. If you had a friend or a family, going through this, do you have some words of wisdom maybe in terms of how to help somebody who's going through a traumatic event, if it's not you, but it's a friend or
Yeah.
family member?
Well, I think finding that support system, finding those people that can surround you and lift you up and help you through everything. And another thing I tell people too is I think the first time you can laugh or have laugh about a memory of that person, I don't know, there's something about that, to me at least, and that I've seen, where if you can smile or laugh, in the memory of that person or thinking of something funny they might have done, that is a way that, I think can kind of start that process. You're still going to be sad, but you can think of the good times with them, the good moments. And again, just that support system. You'll need people who go through that need support, and they need to, if there's too much that they're taking on, find someone who can help you out, make a list for you, open your mail for you, just simple things like that. So you don't feel so overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, even from my own personal perspective, there were people around who didn't want to remind me that my mother had been killed. Right. And I didn't need to be reminded. I woke up every day. I know that my mother has been killed. And so I think that it's okay to acknowledge what has happened. The people who have had the tragedy happen to them, it's not a surprise to them after they've been informed. And so you saying to them, I'm sorry that your mother was killed. Is there anything I can do to help you? And people do need that support, and it's
absolutely
not going to remind them of something, I guess, is
yeah. You're absolutely right. And I have some families that I still reach out on their loved one's birthday every so often, because I know they remember it. Yes. I'm not reminding them of it, but it's right. Like someone else is thinking of them, on their birthday. And so, I think, it's okay to do that and acknowledge that, yes, it's hard and it's not a reminder. Like you said, you wake up every day.
Well, Laura, I admire you so much. I know I've told you that in the past, but it's really true. I admire what you do. Thank God that there are people like you who are willing to and want to do the work that you do, because it's certainly not for everybody. But what, from your perspective, if there were people, what kind of people do this job that successfully? Somebody's maybe listening and saying, man, how would I get involved in this sort of career, and am I a good fit for it?
I think I said it before, being very empathetic to people, and then being extremely flexible. Like I said, you never know what you're going to get going on scene. You don't know what you're going to get when you're knocking on someone's door either. And so you have to kind of read the room, I guess, so to speak, and just be very flexible and, be able to do whatever you need to, because you never know what you're going to get. You never know what you're going to get.
And how does somebody get into the field? Are there just job listings for, hey, come be a victim's advocate, or what's the field entry look like?
Yeah, there are some job listings. I know on COVA, the Colorado Organization for Victim Assistance. And then I know a lot of agencies have volunteers. And again, that's kind of how I got my foot in the door, is I volunteered for several years and then applied for this job with State Patrol. So, if people want to try this, I think volunteering is a really good first step, because until you're on a scene and until you see it, you don't know if you're going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't know if I'd be able to do it until I got to my first scene. And I was like, okay, I can do this. So I think that's a great first step for people, is volunteering with an agency.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Lori. I really, really appreciate it. It's fascinating what you do. It's so important for the community. It's so important for victims. And from somebody who represents victims, I know how much they lean on victims advocates. So thank you for your service to our community. And I really appreciate you being here. And for those who are listening, I hope you learned, I'm sure you learned a lot from Lori about the role of a victim advocate and how important they are to our community as a whole. And so thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay smart, take care of yourself. And I really, really appreciate you being here today, Lori.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for all you do for victims as well. I know you're a huge help to all of them.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been tuning into the Unthinkable podcast with your host, Kyle Bachus. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, kylebachus.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.